Okay, so level 1 sorcerer gets 2 first level spells. Why don't we take a look? Burning Hands, that sounds pretty cool, right? You can hit a lot of targets, maybe win the day in one shot. Charm Person, that's pretty good. Sometimes you just have to manipulate a social situation and do that with magic. But Chromatic Orb lets you change the damage type of your spell, so you're never really facing resistance. That sounds good. Well, I also have a low AC, so Mage Armor sounds like a really good option for me as well. Magic Missile literally never misses its target. Goodness, I only get 2 of these. I think it's pretty easy to see a newer player feeling very overwhelmed with a lot of options when they get to choose a spell, whether they're preparing it for the day or they just get it like a class like the Warlock or Bard or Sorcerer. I mean, shoot, even I feel overwhelmed sometimes when I want to just have everything. So what I did was I put a list of 10 things to consider when picking your spells. I'm Jake from J&J Tabletop, and today, that's exactly what we're going to go over. So I think the very first thing to get, I'll say get out of the way, but it really is the most important thing, and that is choosing that spell going to be fun for you? This is a game, and for some people, having that one single moment that just cracks them up is more important than making sure they're effective in battle. It really is all about what's going to be fun for you, and since this is your character, you should be able to decide what is the most fun thing. The second thing I'd like you to consider when picking your spells is your theme. So if you're playing a Silver Draconic Sorcerer, you have an ice theme to what you're doing. Now, even though a spell like Fireball is almost always the answer, I mean, we have a joke playing the game Destiny. The option was always shoot it with Yallarhorn. I mean, I think in D&D, if you're a wizard or a sorcerer, you could just say, I don't know, I'm just going to shoot it with Fireball. In this situation, though, that might make a disconnect for you and your character, and sometimes if something just doesn't mesh well with the way you see your character, it's going to just detract from the experience. And then if we go back to the first rule we just talked about, it actually takes away from the fun of playing D&D, and that's no good. So the third thing I'd like you to consider when picking your spells is whether or not you have an ability that kind of already accomplishes the same thing. And I think a real good example of that is the Hexblade's Curse feature for a Hexblade Warlock and the Hex spell. If you're playing the Hexblade Warlock, you already have a feature that lets you deal extra damage to a target when you hit it. So even if you like the way the Hex spell works more, you kind of already have something that does that, and you might be better suited picking something else. Obviously, a natural extension of if you have an ability that does something similar, you might already have a spell that kind of does what you're looking to do anyways. 2 good examples might be, say, Darkness versus Fog Cloud, or say Shatter versus Fireball. Now, in those comparisons, one of those options does it better, but sometimes based on the way things are progressing and the theme of your character, and then even maybe just other options at different levels that you progress through, sometimes it just kind of makes sense to go with one over the other, even if it's not quite as powerful. It's really nice to have that retrain ability though, because every time you level up, if you're, say, playing a sorcerer, you can always swap one of those out and pick a different option. Something to think about. The next thing I'd like you to consider when choosing your spells is your spell slot economy. And a really good example of how this can kind of get all messed up is if you're a wizard and you're picking your level 3 spells and you have to choose between Haste, Counterspell, and Fireball. Those are 3 very classic wizard spells that all compete for those level 3 spell slots, and they all do very different things. So don't forget that when you're selecting these things, you still have the option to upcast lower level spells by using a higher level spell slot on it. So you have something like Shatter, you can still use a level 3 spell slot on it to make it do more damage if you do find yourself in a situation that calls for it. Now it's time to start thinking about the action economy. So every round you get an action, a move, bonus action, and 1 reaction. So some spells can compete for those things, and a really good example of this is Cure Wounds versus Healing Word. So you might be a cleric that's on the front lines, and you might be a Tempest domain cleric, so a lot of times you're using your melee weapon to hit things, which uses your action to attack. In this example, Healing Word actually might be stronger because you could smack something in the face with your Warhammer with using your action, and then use your bonus action to revive an ally that was dropped all in one turn, and you're still able to be effective in 2 different ways at the same time. Action economy is very important in Dungeons & Dragons. I highly recommend considering it when selecting your spells. Sticking with the economical theme, let's just go ahead and talk about the concentration economy. The way concentration works in 5th edition is you can only concentrate on one spell at a time. So you might be a cleric that has the idea of saying, I'm going to have Bless and Spirit Guardians active at the same time. And then all of a sudden you realize you can't do that because they both require your concentration. So you're only going to ever use Bless or Spirit Guardians. And depending on the needs of your group, it might be better to choose one and then not choose the other because you just can't have them active at the same time. When you're picking your spells, I think it's also really important to consider the kinds of saving throws that your spells are going to call for. So if you're, say, playing a bard and you really like Dissonant Whispers, Hold Person, and Fear, and you want to have those spells in your spell book or spells known, it might be interesting to note that they all call for a wisdom saving throw. So if you find yourself going up against an opponent that is really good at wisdom saves, you might kind of be up a creek without a paddle there and wishing you had chosen something different. Now, there is kind of a way you might be able to sneakily get some information out of your DM without them realizing it. It's not foolproof, but you might say, hey, does this creature's movement seem like really agile? Do I see intelligence in that person's eyes? Do I really get the feeling that they have a firm grasp of the situation? Also, do they look physically strong and healthy? You actually might be able to get some really good information out of your DM and then even choose the right spell for the right moment against the right creature. And all of a sudden you're really clutch and awesome. Yeah. Definitely something to think about. Which brings us to the 9th thing to consider, and that is to buff or to debuff. That is the question. So the benefits of, say, using a buff spell like Haste or Bless is it always works. Your allies are not going to complain if they're blessed, they're not going to complain if they're hasted, and they're just going to happily accept that benefit every time. The downside to a debuff spell is that's not always the case. So even though it might be more effective to, say, cast Slow on a solo creature that you're fighting because that helps everyone, or to cast Bane on somebody to make sure that their attacks don't hit as often, it might be more effective. It doesn't always work. So that's where the term save or suck kind of comes into play, right? So if you cast Hold Person on someone and they make their saving throw, it just doesn't do anything, and you're kind of screwed at that point. You just wasted a spell slot and your turn. Now, if you have, say, some way to manipulate dice rolls, like if you are a divination wizard or someone else in your party is a divination wizard and they have the portent feature, maybe they have low numbers on those dice rolls to replace with, that might be a way to maybe take a little bit more risks with those plays, and you might be able to still pull them off. And the last thing that I'd like you to consider when picking your spells is, can I take one spell and accomplish multiple things with it? And I think the best example of this has to be the Polymorph spell. Polymorph has tremendous utility both in combat and out of combat. So if you need to be able to, say, fly over, a body of water or a chasm or something like that, you could turn into a giant eagle, probably let a party member or two just climb up on your back, and then there you go. Or maybe you're in the middle of a nasty fight and you turn into a giant ape and you just, well, I guess you go ape at that point. Yeah. So either way, with a spell like Polymorph, you're going to be able to be very reliable very often and do it very well. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss a video. You can also catch us live on our Twitch channel, and the link is in the description below. We've got more videos for you to enjoy, including the suggestions on screen now. Take care, everyone.